What did I like? Travel, Vegas, but there were a lot of things about the Big Four that I did not like. Oh, here's a good one. Monitoring and tracking. Hello and welcome back to the product part where we talk about all things tech, business, startups, ideas, product, and everything related. So today's video is a little bit different to the ones that I have made previously in that it's going to be just a casual, chatty video where I'm going to share my experience working at the Big Four. In case you don't know, the Big Four is basically 4 big companies that are very focused on providing like accounting and consulting services. They're like world-renowned, super credible, and often quite competitive to get into. And I've seen a lot of videos on YouTube with people talking about their Big Four experience, and I know it can be really useful for people considering going into consulting or students who are graduating, considering getting a Big Four job, to know what it's like from different people's perspective. If you're wondering how I ended up working in product management and fast-growing technology and software development, I have a video on my channel already which talks about my career story, but I did start my career working in the Big Four and in consulting. This video could be quite long, so I'm going to be splitting it up into different sections. Feel free at any time to skip ahead to the one that you're most interested in. I will be doing a bit of an overview, and I will be saving the juiciest part for last, which is what I liked and what I didn't like working at the Big Four. So if you are interested in that, make sure you watch all the way through to the end. For some background, I worked at KPMG in New Zealand. We did do some work in Australia as well. I worked in a New Zealand office from 2012 to about halfway through 2015. So I worked at a Big Four for almost 3.5 years. It was my first job after university. I got it straight after graduating. I did business and information systems at uni, and that's why I ended up working in the technology consulting area and not like audit and tax, which is mostly what these Big Four companies are known for. So what did I do at KPMG? I was a consultant. I started out with the title of risk advisor, or advisor, which is kind of like another word for consultant. And then as I progressed to like year 2 and 3, my title changed to senior advisor or senior consultant. I worked in the advisory area. So normally the Big Four have like a big audit practice, a big tax practice, and then they have like consulting or advisory services as well. So I was in the advisory area, and within that I worked in risk consulting. So that's where I started. I kind of like transitioned into doing other types of consulting work, but risk consulting was pretty much when you go into a business and you like interview the key people in that business, and you're usually going in with like a particular focus, with a particular like business process in mind. So you'll interview the relevant people for that process. You'll look at the risks in that process, the potential improvement opportunities. If there are big risks, or if it's like a bank or an insurance company that is super big on regulations, you'll have to look at whether they have controls in place to mitigate those risks. We would have to review a lot of documentation. Of course, like interviewing was a huge part of this. Yeah, and then we would ultimately like analyze everything, like the documentation. We would do walkthroughs with the client. They would show us how they do certain things. We would shadow them, and then we would like write a report at the end giving our recommendations. So that was the gist of what I did. Next, I'm going to talk about how I got a job at the Big Four. I don't really have anything interesting to share here. I just went through like the normal process. I did apply as part of the graduate program, but one of the main things I did unintentionally was I didn't apply when the bulk of the applications for the graduate program open up. I weirdly applied later. And I think maybe there are less people applying later, so your application has a greater chance of being seen or something. Anyway, probably did like some psychometric tests, which suck. And in my opinion, psychometric tests are an absolute waste of time and do not tell you anything about someone's actual ability, and especially their ability to work on the job. But anyway, did a psychometric test, and then yeah, probably had like 1 or 2 interviews, pretty standard behavioral stuff. Now getting to the actual experience of working at the Big Four. Now, as I said, I started as part of the graduate program. We arrived on day 1 and we instantly that day went on a camp which was a really cool idea. It was a way to like bond, it was a way to do something fun, you know, before you dive into your first job. I think we spent the day in the office, meeting everyone else and getting a really super basic intro to like the onboarding week and welcome as a graduate and all that kind of stuff. And then later that day, we literally went on a bus with like 20 strangers that we just met and went and stayed at this lakeside place in tents for the next 3 days. We did lots of really cool activities that honestly took you really outside your comfort zone. And you really ended up building good bonds with people that you're gonna now be working with day to day. Because you are starting as a group, they do tend to spend a bit of time giving you a lot of the basics. So like, you know, what do you do as an advisor or a consultant? What are the different services that KPMG offers? What is the difference between us and our competitors? Like all the super basic stuff. You kind of get like classroom style learning. There was a lot of time spent sitting in like meeting rooms and boardrooms, just watching presentations and different people speak. So it kind of felt like you go from university to like a mini university, because as part of a graduate program, you are still treated in a way like a student, which is a really easy transition to working life in my opinion. And then after that, in like week 2 or week 3, you pretty much just go to your respective areas, your respective teams, and then you'll probably do various types of onboarding with your different teams and your manager and all that kind of stuff. I don't really remember having an onboarding as such in my particular team, so like the advisory team, but it was pretty much, the training was very much like on the job. So you get put on a client with other people who are more senior than you, and you end up doing a lot of really basic type of work at the start, but that's how you kind of learn. So yeah, but now for the most interesting part. What did I like and what did I not like working at the Big Four? This is where it gets kind of juicy. So here are the things that I really liked about working at the Big Four. Number 1, travel. As a consultant, you do get to travel a lot, and you know, that can be a pro at the start and then it can get a little bit tiring, but I did really enjoy it in my time there because I was in my early 20s and it was really fun. I did a lot of traveling to Australia. I traveled to the US, in particular Vegas, got to do some training there, and then I also did a lot of domestic travel within the country itself. Secondly was training opportunities. You do get pretty good like development budget. This is not something super special to the Big Four. I think a lot of companies offer this now. But that was pretty good because you had a pretty like hefty budget and disposable money to kind of spend on whatever you wanted to in order to like learn something new, learn a new skill, and any kind of training or course to support your job. So that's a nice perk to have in any job. Two was the Big Four do support study should you want to continue studying while you're working. Now, mostly I think this is doing like a CA, and that's, you know, was never really applicable for me because I didn't do accounting. But if I had wanted to study anything related to information systems or like security, IT, whatever it was, then they were really supportive, and it was kind of like ingrained in their offerings to support you to do that while you're still working. So I think while I was at KPMG, I ended up doing ITIL, which I kind of forget what it stands for, but I'll put it here. And yeah, it was a nice thing to kind of just do and get over and done with. You had the opportunity to relocate to different countries. Now, because the Big Four is like this massive network of global businesses and offices, you can easily transfer from one country to another. And that's a big reason why people join the Big Four. They can kind of just do an internal transfer. So I saw lots of transfers to other countries during my time, and I think that is a huge advantage of the Big Four. And they all also work in very similar ways. So if you're working in Australia or New Zealand and you go to an office in like London, like typically a lot of the basics are very similar, so you can kind of transition right in. You also got opportunities to do secondments. So the secondment is when you spend your entire time for a long period of time at like another business. So in a way, you've been like outsourced to go and work at another company for like an extended period of time. So I had a secondment when I was at KPMG at a bank, and I think I worked there for like 9 months. And so in a way, it felt like I was employed by another business, which was just a really cool insight into experiencing what life would be like, or my job would be like, should I work at another company. Variety. The variety of the work that you get to do, I think, is one of the biggest benefits and pros to working at the Big Four or in consulting, because it is client-based and project-based. And if it's your first job, you get insight into working in so many businesses, so many industries, so many projects, and you really figure out what you like and what you don't like. If you're working on a project and you don't like it and it sucks, well, you know that you're only going to be there for a really short amount of time. So yeah, I think the variety and exposure that you can get in consulting, and especially the Big Four, is really useful. It is a credible company to have on your CV. You should use that to your advantage. So I knew that, I figured out very quickly that consulting wasn't really for me. I was really glad to have gone through the experience, because having KPMG on my CV just elevated me, I think, beyond other people when I tried to apply for my next job. It's competitive to get into, the work is intense, and you're expected to perform at a certain, I guess, like caliber, and people know that. And so once you have that logo on your CV, there is just this expectation that you kind of operate at a certain level already. And that is super useful to have, and it's carried me forward in my career really nicely. I've even used references to my KPMG days when pitching startups to investors, and they really like that too. Another perk of working at the Big Four, it's not something I really hope I'll have to ever leverage, but I think once you've worked at a Big Four, you can always go back. So you've worked there, then you go away and you do something else for, 5, 10, even 15 years. Consulting is always something you can fall back on. All right, so I've been pretty positive throughout this whole video, but I think it's gonna take a bit of a turn, because like I said, ultimately I realized very quickly consulting was not for me. And sure, I play a big part in that. It's not what I wanted to do, it didn't suit my personality, but there were a lot of things about the Big Four that I did not like. And the pay. Now, money isn't everything, but the Big Four do get away with not paying well, and I wanna say paying well below market rates. And they can get away with that because they know that the experience and credibility that comes from working at the Big Four is what you get in return. And so people are more willing to work for them for a lesser salary. And you do that. As a graduate, you absolutely do that. But I think the number of hours you work, the amount of pressure in such a job is so immense. And oftentimes it really feels like you are not compensated enough for what you do. Secondly is the hierarchy. Consulting companies, and the Big Four especially, do operate in a hierarchy. You have a partner, you have like directors, associate directors, managers, and then like the consultants at the bottom, or the lower level employees. And in doing the work, you really do feel the hierarchy. Like, as a consultant, you do what you do, you write the report, you interview people, and that needs to be signed off by the person above, and then that needs to be signed off by the person above. And you don't have autonomy because you are giving advice, and that advice is coming from the firm, the company. It is a risk for a partner to put that in the hands of like other people in their team. So everything requires a sign off. I personally just don't operate that way. I like autonomy. It's how I work best. And yeah, I just did not like the lack of autonomy and the hierarchy that was present. Oh, here's a good one. I despised being measured on hours. So essentially, when you work at a Big Four, how are they making money? They are making money by selling your time. So it makes sense that they need to measure your time and how many hours you put into doing actual work with clients, because the client's only going to pay you when you do the work. But the focus on what they call utilization, which is essentially the percentage of time in a week that you are being utilized for actual work. There was a lot of monitoring and tracking of this. Each level has a target utilization rate. You would get called out if your utilization didn't meet a certain percentage, or if you took too long to do client project work. Something maybe took you 5 hours when the expectation was that it would take you 2. So a real big focus on that, and you do definitely get called out and put in the spotlight when you don't meet those targets. And I do feel like it's kind of a luck of the draw what projects you get put on, how much work is involved, and some people are always super busy and always 100% utilization, whereas others just aren't, and it's not necessarily much you can do about it. Was how compliance heavy these companies are, and they have to be. So let me just say that I recognize they have to be, and I understand why, but you know, it's just annoying when you're working there. The number of compliance, training sessions you have to do, and the amount of compliance and regulation and sign off involved in everything you do, and how you word something, and making sure there are massive disclaimers on everything. Like I just did not have time for that. And it's not something I enjoy. It always felt like anything that I did or wanted to do had this massive exclamation mark next to it. You always have to tread with caution. And again, it comes with the territory of working in consulting and a Big Four company. They have to protect the company, they have to protect the brand. And if you as an employee say something that isn't representative of the company, that can be a huge legal liability. So totally get it, but there's just a lot of compliance crap involved, and yeah, it just gets very tedious. Oftentimes you as the lower level, I guess, employees or consultants, you didn't really have any say in what projects you were working on, and really if the timelines were realistic, it was like, this is what we need to do, this is how long you have to do it, make it work. So yeah, I think those are the majority of the things I didn't like. And lastly, I just want to share that I learned a lot in my time working at the Big Four. I learned so much about time management, interviewing people, presenting, talking to senior stakeholders, going into a new industry and a new business, and figuring out how to understand the landscape of how that works. Multitasking, looking at how businesses contract services from consulting firms, why companies need auditing and consulting services, and why they need that independent opinion. There's so much I learned in my time at the Big Four, so it's certainly not all bad, but I did want to just put out this video to share my experience as someone who now works in what I would say very different part of the business world, where tech is often quite autonomous. There is more room to experiment. You are hands-on, just giving things a go and putting something minimal out there, taking feedback from the market. And anyway, I do hope this video was helpful. Again, it was just a bit of a rant. If you have any questions about working at the Big Four, considering working in tech, and you're not sure if you should go down the consulting path, hit me up in the comments with any questions you have. Share your experience if you have worked at the Big Four. I know there are so many people, including friends of mine, who absolutely love it. Thank you so much for watching. If you did get this far, stay tuned for more chats like this, because I will be doing a few more videos talking about my experience working in other companies, in more of a casual style of video. If you are on TikTok, don't forget to check out my account. It is called The Product Pup, and it's where I post super frequent, daily, sometimes multiple times a day videos all about tech, product, business, startups, ideas, and everything related. And I will see you in my next video.